So we've talked about a lot of different emotions, anxiety, uncertainty, fear, overwhelm, and things associated with it, like feeling really busy because you're feeling all those things. But there's one glaring category we haven't talked about yet that I know applies to a lot of you out there, and that's the category of feeling down, feeling sad, depressed, in a funk, lethargic, numb, apathetic. Might all be words that you would use to describe what you're feeling. And I know that, statistically millions of Americans every year struggle with depression, and that doesn't go away in the midst of a global pandemic. Depression is still a real issue that affects a lot of people, and it might even be harder in this season of sheltering in place because you don't have your regular coping skills that involve you being out and about in community or doing things that may have shut down as a result of everyone sheltering in place. And so I want to give some, new ways to think about what you can do from your own home to be able to cope with those feelings of feeling down. You don't have to have clinical depression to benefit from these things. And, there are a lot of things that might even be causing you to feel down. Maybe you're grieving the loss of a job or a loved one, or simply grieving the loss of freedom, the loss of community that you used to engage in. And so as you experience that grief, I also want to give you something that makes you feel like you don't have to be at the mercy of your grief. And what I mean by that is it doesn't have to take over your life completely. Yes, it's legitimate. Yes, it's valid. And if you need resources to help pull you out of that, that's what this is for. So I don't want you to feel like, oh, I'm not allowed to feel sad. I'm not allowed to feel down. I'm not allowed to grieve the losses. Yes, you are certainly allowed to feel those things. But if you feel like I want some tools to help bring me out of my grief, even for just a little while, bring me out of my funk that I feel like I'm in, then this is for you. I also want to say, for those of you that are listening that might have a friend or a family member who either struggles with depression or has been feeling down lately, that these suggestions are not meant to be abused in the sense of kind of clobbering someone over the head with here's what you need to do. It's a fight. It's a fight when you're feeling down to kind of do the opposite of what your emotion is telling you to do. And so this is a call for all of us to interact with each other with much patience and much grace in this season, because it doesn't just happen 1, 2, 3. And even for those of you that are watching this, that this is part of your story right now, that you are the one feeling down, that you're the one in the midst of depression. I also want you to have patience and grace for yourself in the process, meaning if it doesn't come easy, if it doesn't come naturally to do these things, that's okay. It is a fight, and you're not fighting alone. So without further ado, I want to introduce 4 ways of thinking that you can engage in from, again, your shelter-in-place order from being at home. And an easy way to remember this is to think of the 4 C's. So the first C is community. We can't get away from it. I think we were, as human beings, created to be in community with one another. We are not solitary creatures, all the way back to the famous phrase, no man is an island. And so community is going to be really important in this season. The tricky part with this, and the other skills for that matter, is that it goes against what your body is telling you to do in this moment when you're feeling down, when you're feeling in a funk. The purpose of sadness, the purpose of kind of that down feeling is so that you can withdraw and reflect on whatever it is that you've lost or are losing, or to kind of protect you by withdrawing. And there are good times for you to be able to withdraw and do that reflection. And then there are times where that withdrawal is actually ineffective for what you want, what you need in this season. And so that's where community comes in. Being able to connect with other people, whether that's, people in your household or people that you can connect with online or virtually, it's going to be really important for you to do the opposite of what your emotion is telling you and actually move toward people when you're feeling down, when you're feeling depressed. Again, this is not easy. It's so easy to say, but so much harder to actually do because it feels like it goes against every fiber in your being in the moment. But recognizing the benefit of doing that, even though it's going against what your emotion is telling you to do, might outweigh the cost, which is that fight. So community can look very different in this season. Maybe you live alone, and so that physical presence isn't there, calling you out to pursue community in other ways virtually. Maybe you live with people that you're not getting along with particularly right now. Maybe you're living with people you do get along with and yet just don't have that desire or feel that same sense of enjoyment that you get from being around them. So there are a lot of different ways to pursue community. Obviously, something like this, video, chats, and not underestimating the good old telephone, giving someone a call and having a good telephone conversation, even if you can't video chat. Being able to connect over deep, hard things, being able to share your experience, feeling heard in the process of feeling down, but then also the ability to connect over seemingly trivial things. Again, this is not something you're going to want to do, have small talk with people, and yet that there's something that comes in the midst of that connection, even the small talk that feels kind of fruitless and frou-frou. Connection with people is really vital in this season, and so get creative with how you look online. I know meetup groups are a really popular thing for people who share common interests to get together, and I've seen some really great things that meetup groups are doing to accommodate the current situation and do some of those meetups online. So while it's great to have people that really know you and understand you and to have conversations and connections with those people, you can also have conversations and connections with people you don't know at all and yet share a common interest with. So that is one avenue of pursuit. The second C stands for contribution. So being able to contribute to the world that you're living in. If you live with someone else who is also struggling right now, or if you know of a neighbor or a group or a charity that might be able to use your help in this season. I'll share from personal experience when I've experienced depression in different points of my life. My experience of it was really inward drawing. All of the negative thoughts and all of the sensations, like wanting to pull the covers up over your head and just kind of stay with yourself. Again, that's part of the motivation of that emotion of sadness, is to draw inward. But I noticed all the thoughts kind of centered around who I am, how I'm relating to people, what they think of me, what my value is in the world that we're living in. And contribution takes those inward thoughts and kind of shifts them outward so that you are looking at the world and able to see someone else, see another group of people, see a need in the world and meet it, even in the midst of what you're feeling. So by shifting those thoughts outward and looking at what can I do, how can I contribute to the world and my spheres of influence, it helps kind of redirect your thoughts so that you don't fall into the spiral of how you're perceived, what you're doing, but really focusing in on someone else or something else outside of yourself. Again, really hard to do, takes work and takes practice, but if it gives you even an hour or two a day of relief from the weight of the thoughts about how you see yourself and the places you feel like you don't measure up, or the places you feel like are suffering right now, then it's an hour or two more of relief than staying in those thoughts. You can get creative with that too. So being able to contribute right from your living room by sending a note of encouragement either through email or snail mail to someone else that you know, or maybe you get information from somewhere where you know, maybe you don't know this person and yet you know that they need encouragement, being able to send something out into the world like that. You can help a neighbor. If you're going to the grocery store, asking a neighbor, hey, can I grab something for you on the way while I'm already there? Being able to help. I know a lot of animal shelters have talked about a decrease in adoptions because of everything that's going on. So if you're in a position financially and I've always wanted to adopt a pet, maybe that's a way of contributing. Pets have this extraordinary way of making themselves the center of attention. I know I have 2 dogs and they want your attention when they want it. And so being able to, again, draw yourself out of those inward thoughts and point yourself outward. The third C is being creative. When we are feeling down, we often lose our sense of wanting to create something new, wanting to generate something outside of ourselves. And this is one that doesn't require that you be an artist or gifted at art in any way, though even if you're not gifted and you say, I just want to put some paint on paper, by all means go for it. But creativity really spans a lot of different areas. So yes, there are the arts like creating music and poetry and short stories, drawing, painting, things like that. But then you can also be creative in cooking and baking, literally creating things from resources that you have. Creating by planting some flowers outside, or creating different ideas, thinking about your work differently. What are some ideas that you can do when things kind of resume back to normal? How can you do something different at work or at school? Creating by rearranging your physical space, rearranging your furniture. There are a lot of different ways to be creative. And again, this goes against this feeling that you have right now, which says, like, who cares? Why try? Like, so what if I move the furniture around? It's exhibiting this sense of agency that you have to be able to make something, change something, and use the gift of creativity that each and every one of us possesses in one way or another. Again, it doesn't have to be artistic in nature, but just thinking about how you can make your impact even within the 4 walls of your home. The final and fourth C is curiosity. We lose a sense of curiosity about anything outside of ourselves when we're struggling with sadness or depression. And it goes against, you heard me say this several times, it goes against what you're feeling in the moment to actually look around and be curious about your surroundings. Be curious about, you spend so much time in this place called home, right? And maybe you think, there's nothing to be curious about. I live here. I've lived here for 5, 10, 20 years. It is. I can tell you every nook and cranny. But my guess is that you probably can't. That there's still things to be learned about the home that you live in. So be curious about, the colors of the walls and the fabrics of the curtains and the fibers on the floor. It seems really silly, and that's okay. It's okay to be silly in this time. But as you explore, and maybe you sit in a particular chair, usually try sitting in a different chair. What's that different perspective like? Being able to be curious about what's going on outside. It makes me think of the show Bewitched. I really enjoyed that show, and there was the neighbor Gladys, who was always kind of like peeking out the window trying to see what was going on in the neighborhood. Be nosy about who's walking by your street, and how, make stories up about who they are and why they're walking. Like, oh, that person walks down the street every day at this time. Even if the story is not true, you're merging that curiosity and creativity together to be able to just, what do you think their story is? What do you think their name is? Why do you think they're walking down the street every day around the same time? Again, it's a strategy to be able to pull you out of yourself and those negative thoughts and bring you into the world that you're currently living in. Even if it's not completely real, it's real to you in that moment. Being curious about yourself. This is one that, even if you're not struggling with sadness, I think can be really fun for some of you. And that's if you Google get to know you questions online. There are places where you could get hundreds and hundreds of questions of get to know you. And they're meant to be for you to ask other people, to make small talk, to get to know someone else. But what if you used it and got to know yourself in this season? Maybe, you've always had, this is my favorite food. Thinking and reevaluating, is it still my favorite food today? Would I pick something else today? You are a different person than you were yesterday. Every single moment forms and weaves together a tapestry of who you are. And so maybe you would have answered, that's my favorite food, and you've been answering that, but kind of sitting with yourself and getting to know yourself in this moment. Is that my favorite food still? Is that still my favorite restaurant? Do I still like that season the best? Why do I like that season the best again? Get to know yourself in this season. You are a wonderful, amazing creature. You have a story worth telling. You have a personality worth sharing. And that is true even if you're sharing it and telling it to yourself. But also gives you the opportunity, as you get to know yourself better, to be able to share that with other people as they get to know you. So those are the 4 C's. I hope that that is a helpful starting point. It's certainly not an exhaustive list for how to cope with feelings of sadness or depression when you feel like they're taking over too much of your life. But it's a starting point, and I hope that's a helpful thing to you. Thanks for listening, and I will see you again tomorrow.